Happy Tuesday, everybody, and welcome into another edition of GC Live Talking Tuesday Nights. I'm Mike Yuva. Intern Joe will be with us shortly. Lot to get into today. Lot to get into from the last time we talked last week. There's been changes on South Carolina's coaching staff. There's been an addition, a new welcome home, if you will. And we had a press conference today with that, so we will get into that. You had 5 Gamecocks drafted over the weekend. In addition to that, 4 other players signed as undrafted free agents. And, of course, the welcome home tour will begin for Shane Beamer in the coming days. With all that going on, transfer portal, it closed up just the other day, end of the month of April. And, of course, with recruiting, it's continuing to pick up. And South Carolina will look to add some more pieces in the coming weeks and months as they continue to fill up their class of 2024. So, again, lots to get into tonight. And Justin says, good to see you're alive after the Bruins and Celtics games. You know, Gamecock fans, especially football, you guys understand what pain and suffering is. So I can't really say much about going through this over the last couple of days with my Boston teams. You guys have seen some lows, but of course, as we know, with Shane Beamer joining the team 2 years ago to take over the helm, South Carolina has been heading in the right direction, and that is certainly where we will continue tonight by beginning to talk about the loss of Jimmy Lindsay at defensive line coach, which to me was surprising news. Shane Beamer shared today during the press conference, we're talking about Travian Robertson coming home to South Carolina, phenomenal football player during his time at USC. And he will be a great fit for USC for multiple reasons. But Jimmy Lindsay, right? 12 days ago, this is from Beamer today during the press conference. 12 days ago, Brian Kelly reaches out to Beamer, letting him know that LSU has an opening for defensive line coach and that they're interested in bringing in Lindsay. Or there's a potential that they could bring Lindsay in. And then 6 days later, that's when things started to really pick up. And then eventually Lindsay gets brought on. And now he's working over at LSU. In steps Travian Robertson. I will say this, though, about Lindsay. According to multiple reports, Lindsay's going to be making $750,000. That's more than double of what he was making at South Carolina, I believe. I'll make sure that I get that number exact, because as the Jimmy Lindsay contract was coming out, that is when South Carolina's press conference was beginning. So I want to make sure I have that right. Okay, not exactly double. He was set to make $475,000 at South Carolina, but still going from $475,000 up to $150,000. Clearly, he's making much more money. And on top of that, LSU is going to be paying out his buyout that he owes South Carolina. That was reported from Brody Miller of The Athletic today, around 5 o'clock, right before that press conference began for Travian Robertson. So I bring all that up because when I heard the Lindsay news, because I was with Jimmy Lindsay, I'd say maybe a week and a half prior to this news, there was an event at Bourbon on Main Street. The Gamecock Bourbon Club, along with Garnet Trust and CB90, they put this great event on, and Jimmy was there. And you would never have expected that Jimmy would be on his way out. Not from the way that he was talking from a recruiting standpoint. And he was glowing about the job USC was doing. And he was talking about some of the players in particular that they were trying to go after. So I bring that up because I think it just shows that Jimmy loved it at USC, but this opportunity was one that he just couldn't say no to. So I hate seeing Jimmy Lindsay go from a standpoint of I thought he was hungry when it came to recruiting. I thought he enjoyed the Columbia community, Gamecock fans, but at the same time, too, insert Travian Robertson, who really doesn't need an introduction. I mean, here's a guy that played at South Carolina from 2007 to 2011, defensive captain for USC, all SEC honors. I mean, he was just phenomenal. Absolutely incredible. Not only that, but he has a very, very good relationship with Shane Beamer because Beamer was there during that time period at South Carolina when he was working under Steve Spurrier. So you add all that up, you add in the fact that he went to the NFL, was drafted by the Atlanta Falcons, and then he hopped around a little bit. Seattle Seahawks, the then Washington Redskins. Career ended. I mean, I know he went through some injuries during his career, even going back to USC, but his career ended not too long after getting drafted and going to the NFL. And then he began his coaching career. Goes to Georgia State, hops around, goes to Albany State, back again at Georgia State. So I say all this because he's a guy that has experience with coaching. It's not like one of these situations where, okay, he just went to the NFL and then boom, he's right back at South Carolina. No, he's hopped around. He's hopped around even to the point we're talking about Albany State. That's a Division II school. He's paid his dues. He is someone that is talented, no question. He was very talented as a player, especially at South Carolina. But he's done it at 3 different spots, 3 different places. When you throw in Tulane, which he was just there for this past season, he understands what recruiting looks like. He remembers what it was like to be recruited. And he mentioned that in his introductory press conference, that love is not spelled Love, as he said. It's spelled Time. And showing these prospects, showing the players that are here your time and giving them your time is what will ultimately lead to that love being formed. So I thought that was something powerful that he said. And everything that he said today, and it looks like Intern Joe will be ready in a second. Everything he said today just went to that next level of showing you how bad he wanted to be at South Carolina, how much he was paying attention to things over the last couple of years while also handling his coaching duties wherever he was. So I say those things because Gamecock fans, if there's anything that I've been able to pick up from you guys just want people that freaking care. And if they are one of your own, you're going to care even that much more. And that's the case with Robertson. He comes back to South Carolina, a place he understands what this fan base is thriving for. He understands what Shane Beamer has been able to do in the last 2 years. He's paid attention. But now he's back here. And another thing he mentioned, the timing. Being able to get back to South Carolina right now at a time where the excitement, the buzz, the energy, it hasn't been this high since, towards the end of his tenure at South Carolina. And he mentioned one of his favorite moments during his playing days was being part of that upset against Alabama in 2010. So again, everything he said today, I think it really resonated with the fan base from just reading some of the comments. I think it really resonated with this fan base and reading the comments on the message board on Gamecock Central. The hire, it was one that Gamecock fans were hoping for because, again, I understand you guys like to see your own get brought back here. But he paid his dues at other schools, Georgia State, Albany State, throw in Tulane most recently, and now he comes back. 34, young guy, hungry, understands recruiting, is going to be able to relate to these players, which is something that we've mentioned with other coaches on this staff that Beamer's brought in over the last year or so. Think of a guy like Sterling Lucas, another guy with NFL experience. This is something that it doesn't shock me, Intern Joe, to hear that Shane Beamer said today, I only made one call. I made one call, and that was to Robertson. And you could see why after paying attention to that press conference today. Again, he said everything right.
Yeah, absolutely. I unfortunately did not get to watch a whole lot of his presser as I was preparing for GC Live Fowl Balls, which just wrapped up. If you guys were watching a little bit of that, thank you for tuning in. But yeah, no, I mean, Mike, I think it's a perfect hire. I'm very, very, very excited for it. Congrats to Jimmy Lindsay for his new gig. Super nice guy. Unfortunately, joining Brian Kelly. But either way, I think Robertson is such a good hire for USC. He really is. And again, keeping the theme of keeping guys home. We've seen that trend try to stick in South Carolina last couple of years. I mean, we saw Marshawn Lattimore join the team. We saw Connor Shaw join as in a coach's role. But out of anybody, I think Robertson is the guy that's going to stick, right, Mike? I think he's one of the guys that's, I forget who was talking about this on the radio. So I forget who I heard this from, but they were talking about just how he's been working up to this moment, how he's been putting himself in a position to be a coach at South Carolina. And to get here, to get back to where he played, it's such a big moment for him, and I'm happy for him. I'm excited to meet him. Again, didn't watch a whole lot of his presser, but I'm really, really excited. And another thing I'm really excited for is also you brought him up as I was waiting to come on, but I'm really excited to see Robertson and Sterling Lucas work together. I mean, two guys that were just absolute menaces in their playing career and seemed really, really good coaches too.
And Sterling, the interesting thing about Sterling is how well the job he's been able to do from a recruiting standpoint. And that's not to take anything away from Clayton White. That's not to take anything away from the job that Jimmy Lindsay did. I did see a lot of comments, which I was kind of surprised, but not really. Not really. When Lindsay left last week, just reading some of the comments, it was kind of like, he's not going to, it's not like we're losing that much. It's like, relax. All right. Easy. I think it's extremely premature to say stuff like that. The guy leaves. All right. I understand. Lindsay was part of winning some pretty important recruiting battles for South Carolina. I'll try to pull up some of them for tonight, but I bring that up just because I think the only thing that maybe leaves a bitter taste in some of the fans' mouths are, okay, can this impact us with our 2024 class? Can this impact us when it comes from a 2025 recruiting class standpoint? There are some players that South Carolina are going after that Lindsay, even though his name wasn't attached the way I think some Gamecock fans, the way they were hitting up the message boards and posting on social media, it was portrayed as if he had really nothing to do with some of these guys that they're talking to. And that could not be further from the truth. I could promise you that. I mean, I've seen messages for crying out loud. So I say that as you see Robertson here. I don't want to dwell so much on Jimmy Lindsay, but I feel like it's important just to, okay, that's over with. Okay. And again, I mentioned Brian Kelly. Give Kelly credit for reaching out to Beamer and saying, hey, look, this is what we want to do. This is what we're interested in doing, because we've seen it happen way too many times in college football. And not that anyone necessarily owes anyone anything, but I always appreciate it when coaches go about things that way. And that was certainly the case here, as Beamer mentioned. So again, I bring that up because now you're at Robertson's coming in. There's so many things that he mentioned, though, that I think some people who are either younger or maybe they didn't follow Gamecock football that much going back then. Met his wife here. His wife was a champion when it came to track and field. His son had his very first birthday, as Travian mentioned today. His very first birthday party for his son was at Andy's Deli. The late Andy Schlong threw a birthday for his son there. So just these little things that he mentioned today that I feel like are going to resonate with this fan base. And you mentioned the Sterling Lucas part, that dynamic. If he can come in here and he can be able to recruit the way that I think a lot of us expect him to be able to. If he can do that with Sterling, who's proven that in his short time at USC, that dynamic, man, it's scary because you have two young coaches, and the reviews on Sterling Lucas so far, my God, my goodness, from talking to some of the
Mike,
coaches
it's
in that
crazy.
building, it's a good young dynamic they have over there, Intern Joe.
Yeah, absolutely. I couldn't agree more. Like I said, I'm really, 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 really excited to see what these two can do, not only from a recruiting standpoint, but a football standpoint, right? Like I've gotten to know Coach Lucas a little bit, just in my summers here and whatnot, talking to him. First off, unbelievable human, but secondly, I've watched him coach at some of these summer camps and stuff like that. Unbelievable coach as well, and I've seen him recruit firsthand as well. And I mean, really, 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 really good recruiter. I've watched him, just interact with a couple of guys, and he means everything that he says. And I think he likes recruiting in a way. And this is Sterling Lucas that I'm still talking about, but I think every vibe I've gotten from Travian Robertson, excuse me. My brain's still a little bit fried from finals. But I think these two are really, 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 really similar. And I think they're going to work really well together, coaching the defensive line. Just because, again, when you have two guys that are similar and want to recruit like they do, it's a two-headed monster. And I think, I don't want to say this prematurely, but for me, it looks like all signs of South Carolina, being a defensive line school, defensive tackle, defensive end, that's coming to fruition a little bit here. And we see obviously the potential with Dylan Stewart if they get him back. You saw it a little bit with Birch, but I think, not only is the DBU thing kind of coming back, but the defensive line and defensive end kind of positions also reemerging for South Carolina as a spot of, just to look for. And we'll get to the NFL draft in a little bit, but I know there's certainly one defensive tackle that I liked that went to, a certain team in a certain city.
So a couple things that Beamer said today, and you can find this all over at Gamecock Central if you don't want to necessarily go back and watch the video and watch the full press conference from Robertson. But a couple things that he said today. We mentioned the part about how Brian Kelly had reached out to him and trying to just give you an idea of how quickly this all happened. And, he admitted in there, Beamer, that it was disappointing from a timing standpoint for this all to happen right now. Said, quote, "It's disappointing to say the least to have a coach leave right now after spring ball with the portal window just now closing." So again, it kind of shows you an idea of what was really going on. Like this really just came out of nowhere 12 days ago, as he mentioned from his conversations with Brian Kelly. And again, we mentioned that number getting paid, almost $300,000 more at LSU. It's hard to be upset with a coach, for taking an opportunity like that, especially one at LSU. So, that's one thing I'd say about that. But the other thing, too, he said that Beamer said that, him and Coach Spurrier spoke last night before the golf event about Robertson. And Spurrier was really happy about him coming home, said Robertson has a great work ethic. And, he also mentioned that Robertson had some time to hang out with Taylor Edwards today, about personnel and the guys that they're recruiting and getting him ready because he's going right out there on the road to recruit. I don't know if it's tomorrow if it's the next couple of days, but the point being is he's getting here from Tulane. The family's not here yet. They're down in Tulane still. He's excited to get the family up here, but he's hitting the ground running. It was his first day in the building today. And one thing that we didn't have a chance to ask him, but from talking to people, and you hear this from a lot of alum, and even when Beamer came back too, they're just amazed about that building. So the pride of being back in that building, a building that they didn't have when he played 10, 15 plus years ago at South Carolina, 15 years ago, even going back a little bit more than that. So to be in that building, to know what they were able to accomplish at South Carolina when he was a captain, which was the beginning of the greatest time period in Gamecock football history. And that's no disrespect to the Black Magic season, but you're talking about era. So they were able to do all these things, Intern Joe. Now you have this building. This guy has to be on cloud 9 right now.
Oh, yeah.
Looking at all the resources they have.
We can tell why they're doing so well recruiting wise. They have one of the best indoor facilities in the country, and so it's easier to recruit when you have a facility like that looks like that, and every looks I mean, Mike, you've kind of been through the facility, if you will. I mean, it's nuts. It's quite frankly, it's ridiculous.
They gave us a tour. They gave me a tour when it first opened up. I mean, I've been around that building a couple times, but I remember that tour though. You're just like, wow. And now, granted, the thing is, you always have to keep up after like a 5-year period. You're always going to have to keep up with the Joneses, as the old cliche goes. But the point being is, and I'm not just saying this, like I got no skin in the game when it comes to South Carolina. I didn't go there. I'm not a fan. And I know it pisses people off when I say that, but like the whole point being is, I say this with no bias. I know I work for a Gamecock website, but I would say this if I work. I mean, shoot, Clemson's got great facilities. So USC's facilities, there's no reason why you can't win recruiting battles when you show people that building. There's no reason why you can't develop players to be able to play at that next level, which, of course, they did over this past weekend, as well as being able to get the most out of them when they're at USC. And they have the players to do so as well. So, again, you bring that in there, goodness. I mean, think about it. Like, that building doesn't get built without, absolutely will, 1,000%. And it's players like him. We can go back to the Marcus Lattimores, Yelshawn Jeffries, the Clownies, the Connor Shaws, the Steven Garcia. We can keep going on and on down the list. But, and I'm not trying, I mean, look, the past is the past, Intern Joe.
Yeah.
But you give that team, that building, when Robertson was playing, Alshon was there. God. Think of, that could be the difference between landing an additional 4-star, 5-star, who could help get you over that hump. And don't get me wrong. I mean, they played a very talented Auburn team in that SEC championship game, which, of course, we all know what happened with Auburn and Cam Newton. I mean, that was a phenomenal team. But I say all that because, yeah, I mean, he is a guy that understands what it was like practicing at the proving grounds. He understands what it was like before that building was freaking even up there. So, again, young guy, but he understands what winning looks like at South Carolina because he was part of that.
Yeah, no, I agree. And to Will's point, I couldn't agree more with this statement. Talk about a guy who, and Beamer was here in the glory days, right? The last time this program was up, and I guess the highest it's been in decades. So to have guys that have been here for that, or that were here for that know what it looks like to win at Carolina, I think it's huge. It's a very, very, very big advantage. And I think that's how you continue success down the road too, is you keep bringing back guys that were here during, the days. They know what winning is like at the school, and they know what winning is like, in the SEC. So to have those guys, to bring those guys back into the building and cycle them through and keep that culture here is the biggest thing. I think it's massive to get a guy like Robertson.
A couple of things I want to add too, and then we'll move along here. But of course, the biggest story of the day, Travian Robertson being officially introduced as South Carolina's newest defensive line coach. He replaces Jimmy Lindsay, who just last week took the job over at LSU. That pay increase, according to The Athletic, Jimmy Lindsay going from, what was it? It was $475,000 at South Carolina is what he was expected to make this season, and now that bumps up to $750,000 at LSU, a 2-year deal, and the buyout is $300,000. So South Carolina will get money from Jimmy leaving, $300,000. So I don't know how much that really makes an impact. When it comes to coaches' contracts, is it like, does it give you a little bit more money to fool around with? Is it kind of just, goes into the swear jar, right? It's one of those things you just put off to the side. It'll help you. I don't know. I don't know how that all comes down, but never hurts to hear that you're still getting paid for something. And again, Lindsay, I thought he did a good job at South Carolina. There's certainly some things that we could talk about from a run defense standpoint. I don't know. I wouldn't put all of it on him. But certainly, a positional coach, you're gonna have to answer some questions. And even with Clayton White has done a tremendous job with being able to turn this defense into a defense that was, before he got here, South Carolina's defense was in absolute shambles. They had talented players. We saw that. We saw guys getting drafted. I mean, J.C. Horn was the first player drafted in his class from a defensive side of the ball that year for the Panthers. Israel Mukwamu got drafted. Ernest Jones, goes on and wins a Super Bowl with the Rams. They produced talented guys before Clayton White and Shane Beamer, they came on in here. But there's certainly some areas, too, that they still need to get better at. And run defense was one of those areas that we've talked about ad nauseum going back to last season. It was talked about a lot all spring. Jimmy Lindsay had even mentioned it. Clayton White mentioned how much they've put more of a focus on run defense this spring and heading into the summer. So, again, that's not to say Jimmy Lindsay was, the next coming. But at the same time, too, I thought he was able to do some really good things. And, again, from a recruiting standpoint, he helped South Carolina out in a lot of ways. And was a good person. But you go from that to Robertson. I think a lot of Gamecock fans will say, okay, I'm excited about this one. One thing I do want to mention, though, and then we'll move on, Intern Joe, I thought was very, very interesting that Robertson mentioned. He said he could have probably called Steve Spurrier and get a job on staff, right? Grad assistant, whatever, right? You see that happen from time to time. But he wanted to earn it, he said. And see if he wanted to get into coaching too, because he didn't want to waste not just Spurrier's time, but South Carolina's time. He didn't want to waste other coaches and players' time. I've been part of that. I mean, I remember being back in college. You have guys come in and they don't know if they want to get into college coaching. And I understand it's D2, but still, when you have guys that don't want to be there or they're still trying to figure out, hey, is coaching for me? It takes away from the program. It takes away from the players that you're trying to develop, because they can sense it on your face. So I give Robertson a lot of credit for saying that. And, man, I think South Carolina is going to get a guy who's going to be an absolute dog when it comes to recruiting. I really do. I think when we look back, South Carolina's recruiting class right now, number 6. We'll get into recruiting. Let's just get right into it right now. Dylan Stewart is still out there. And, of course, if they're able to land Dylan Stewart, that would be a game changer for South Carolina for multiple reasons. But I say that because now you insert a guy like Robertson, okay? He's going to have to build relationships as well because, look, Sterling, Robertson, you want to be able to have, regardless if you're recruiting a defensive end, regardless if you're recruiting a defensive tackle, you want those coaches to be able to build a relationship with all your defensive linemen on top of course, which goes without saying, your defensive coordinator. Because when you can do that, when you have defensive tackles going into edge coaches meetings, not meetings, excuse me, but their office, and they're just talking ball. Now they have a better understanding of what their teammates are doing and their responsibilities. And then they can go out there and they can do their job even that much better. So, again, I think it's going to be important, not just with Stewart, but just talking about recruits in general, that Robertson comes in here and he's able to be a dog. But I think having the guys around him, from the Taylor Edwards, not even just talking Shane Beamer, Sterling, Clayton, he's got tremendous resources around him. And guys who have done a phenomenal job with recruiting. It's kind of just, all right, next man up mentality. And you have this guy come in here, and of course, he's got a background at USC. That certainly helps as well.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I think again, we've been talking about it. But again, it really is a big advantage for South Carolina when it comes to recruiting this hire. And I love the energy that Sterling Lucas brings. And from what I saw from Robertson's press conference, he's going to kind of bring like an upbeat kind of energy to him.
Yep.
And not to ding on Coach, not Teasley, because Teasley's the offensive line coach. But
Lindsay.
Coach Lindsay was a little bit more reserved and whatnot. So I think Robertson and Sterling Lucas, you get two extroverts on the defensive line. I think that helps a little bit too. But recruiting wise, I think he's definitely going to play a role in helping recruit Dylan Stewart.
Mm-hmm.
I know that's Sterling Lucas's guy for sure, but I think it helps when you have a guy like Travian Robertson, who has been at South Carolina in the glory days, and you can just be like, hey, ask him about how good it gets here. I think that's huge. And again, when they're working well together and both units, because Edge is their defensive lineman at the end of the day. An edge rusher is. So I think it's huge, recruiting wise, all around the board, really. The hire, and then obviously the Dylan Stewart thing is kicking up a little bit. When I talked to him last summer, he said he'd wanted to commit before his senior season. So it's getting that time, Mike. Obviously, May is kind of dead in terms of recruiting, but June is right around the corner in terms of when recruiting heats back up and camps start and guys start committing. So be on the lookout for that. I don't necessarily think Dylan will be a June guy, but I think he'll definitely be taking and making some visits for sure. Something to look out for.
Well, and for what it's worth, at least right now, and again, these things can always change. We saw that, of course, back in February with how things played out for Nicholas Harbor. But when you're talking about RPM, the recruiting prediction machine by On3, right now, South Carolina has the third best odds of being able to land the talented 5-star. And of course, with On3, they're higher on him than any other service. We have him rated as number one, not just in DC, not just at Edge, but nationally. And then, his consensus rating, he's still a 5-star, the 8th top prospect overall, which is the industry comparison. That's just taking On3, 24/7, ESPN, and Rivals. Rivals in ESPN, not as high as 24/7 and On3 are about Stewart. They have him as a 4-star, but still very talented guy. Ohio State right now. Right now, it's been Ohio State at 44.7 and Alabama at 39.1%. South Carolina sitting there with the third best odds as of today, according to On3's RPM. South Carolina sitting there at 5%. So I say that because, again, recruiting battles, they can go up, down, all around. And as we know with South Carolina, he's took a bunch of visits.
Ton of visits. And everybody inside the building is really, really excited about him.
Well, and the other thing too is, and again, when you look at the visit center, and I'm going to pull that up right now for people to understand what I'm talking about. When you go to On3 and you go to Dylan Stewart's page, there's so many neat features that you can fool around with if you had not had the opportunity to do so. If I go to his page right now, right? So now you can see this. Again, you can see where the RPM right now is. Ohio State. They have Ohio State and Alabama as the leaders. And even though South Carolina is down at 5%, I mean, look, I wouldn't rule anything out. I really wouldn't.
Not yet, at least. Not yet.
No. So here's the visit center. Here's what I'm talking about. Here's what I'm talking about, the visit center. So it shows you the visits, right? How many visits he's took. Now, these are the ones that have been reported, okay? Reason I say that is there are times where a player will show up to a university. I'm making this up. Maybe he went to Ohio State. Maybe he went to Georgia for an unofficial visit, and it doesn't get reported. Whoever the reporters are in that area, or what, it just doesn't get out that he went there. So I bring that back up because you look at it. Okay, South Carolina has had a great opportunity to have him on campus a lot, and that's the truth. But there also are things that sometimes don't get reported that aren't in here. But for the sake of what we're seeing, you could see South Carolina, according to the reported visits, they've had the most. And as you can see right here, Georgia coming up next month, Ohio State, June 16th, and then South Carolina on the 23rd of June. So I bring those things up here because, look, again, even though the RPM has Ohio State and Alabama there, I think you're crazy if you look at it and you don't think South Carolina has a chance.
And I mean, he's visiting South Carolina last too, Mike. I think that has some significance, right? I don't know. I've always seen
it. Can't hurt.
No.
I mean, look what just happened in basketball.
Mm-hmm. It's whoever
BJ
visits.
BJ comes, BJ Mack comes, and they blew them away. And if you haven't seen the video, we put it in our recruiting video of BJ Mack, not to get too sidetracked here. But BJ Mack went to Halls with his family. Lamont Paris was there. I want to say it was Michi Johnson. But you had all these pictures that said, we want BJ on the table. And in addition to that, when they got their dessert at the end, the Halls workers were wearing shirts, custom-made shirts that said, we want BJ, and it had his face on it. And they all came out, we want BJ. And they came out doing that. And I could tell you, it blew the family away, blew the coaching staff away a little bit. I think some of them weren't realizing that was about to happen. I knew some did because some of them, helped make it happen. But I say that because being able to do that, leaving that impression in a recruit's mind, and obviously for Dylan Stewart, he's not going to be making his decision necessarily after he visits South Carolina on, June 23rd.
Yeah.
But it doesn't hurt because he goes somewhere. He might already know, okay, I understand Ohio State. I understand Alabama. Yeah. I mean, but here's the other part, Intern Joe. Look at these 4 schools. What is the outline?
That's what I was getting at, right? You're in a big boy recruiting battle. We talked about this with the Nicholas Harbor thing, right? You're in a big boy recruiting battle with big boy schools. Ohio State, Bama, Georgia, top 3 teams in the country. Like that, this is a big deal. And I did also want to say this, not to slight on BJ Mack, but BJ Mack isn't the number 1 overall ranked recruit in the country.
No, absolutely not.
You're pulling out every single stop for this kid. Not only are you taking him to Halls and doing the shirts and everything, but you're going to do anything it takes to get this kid home. And I mean, from when I talked to Sterling Lucas about it this past summer, I'm excited to, kind of pick his brain a little bit about it this summer. I'm sure he'll be a little bit more closed down with it because they can't give anything out because now Dylan is going to be making his decision coming up. But, Sterling Lucas, from the minute he's, laid eyes on him pretty much, he's like, I want this kid bad. And from watching him play at Shane Beamer's camp last summer, I see every reason why you should want him. And two, I think, having the visit last, I think it's fresh in his mind, right? Yep. I'm sure he'll make unofficial visits after that and whatnot. But I think, when you have the last visit, then that recruit, even if he's not trying to, Mike, he's going to be comparing, South Carolina to Ohio State and Georgia and Bama and whatever. And I think, for me at least, there's a little bit of recency bias. If I were in his shoes, I always would take the last place that I visited. But I think it has some weight to it that, like all the South Carolina coaches are going to be telling him is like, hey, we're the best in this. We're the best in this. We're the best in this. Like facility-wise and all this, school-wise, whatnot. And then you have, all these other schools to compare it to. And so I think having your last visit at South Carolina, I think that's a pretty good sign.
And look, we can get excited about Dylan Stewart all we want. Marcus Lattimore has said it before. There's something to be said when there's a 5-star on campus. You kind of just get all, the fan base gets kind of all googly-eyed over it.
Marquee goes up on.
Right. You saw that, of course, with Nicholas Harbor and with Harbor even being back at the spring game. So I say that because that's great. And we'll see how things play out with that. But there's going to be multiple players. And Chris Clark did a phenomenal job today with just a rundown of some of the players to expect on campus at South Carolina, especially in that month of June. Because, again, May, slower month. There's a lot of camps going on. Dante Reno was just named MVP at one of them.
Mhm.
Shout out to Reno. But Jonathan Paylor, okay? North Carolina guy.
It's a big one.
4-star. So I'm just going to bring up some of the players that we should keep an eye on. I don't want to be sharing the article that that Chris put out because it's a premium one. So I just want to show you some of the guys though that South Carolina is looking at and who are going to be in here. Jordan Thompson is another guy to keep an eye on. And the interesting thing too is, look, Intern Joan, you brought this up before.
Yeah.
Especially with Dylan Stewart. Rutgers, when you look at a Jersey guy, Don Bosco, which is one of the best schools in the country, by the way, when it comes to high school. Very talented school for football. Rutgers in there, that doesn't surprise me. It's like, all right, that's a school that's out that way. And then you see Michigan and Georgia. It's just like, okay, like those are some, those are teams that have been, yeah. Yep. And then you see South Carolina in there. So the reason I bring this up is this. I still feel like South Carolina has a ways to go. As Shark brings up with, Shark 62. Yeah, there's going to be a lot of people on campus. And a lot of them I'm mentioning right now, they're going to be there on June 23rd. And they're going to be out throughout the month. It's going to be scattered with some of the other players that I'll mention. But don't you notice something, though? Which is, again, USC, in my opinion, they're not at that level where Clemson is. They're not at that level where Georgia, Alabama, insert whatever, Ohio State. They're not on that level yet. They're not on that level yet when it comes to recruiting nationally. However, what they have been able to do, you land someone like Nicholas Harbor. You've been able to get off to a hot start here for the class of 2024. You finished very strong for the class of 2023. If you're able to continue to have success on the field, okay, that's what it's about, consistency. If you're able to get to 8 wins again this year, and I think that's the mark to at least get to. I'm not saying that will be what South Carolina will finish. I don't want someone to say, oh, Mike said they're only going to have 8 wins. No. Get to at least 8 wins this year because then you're able to show that consistency. You have a very young football team. I think that gets overlooked so much. Yes, they have Spencer Rattler back. Yes, they have Juice Wells back. Yes, they have some very talented guys that they've been able to bring in through the transfer portal. But in the grand scheme of things, this is a young football team. So what you want to be able to do more than anything is show consistency. Continue to take steps forward. Do not go backwards. Do not have 7 wins this year. Do not have 6 wins. God forbid, do not find yourself in a situation where you can't make a bowl game. Mm-hmm. Get to 8 wins because these recruits we're talking about right now, this wasn't the case 2 years ago with the players that we're talking about of that caliber of player. You do that, you get to 8 wins this year. At least everything you're pitching from a recruiting standpoint, you can continue to sell that even more. And with the young, talented players they have already on their roster, shoot, this team in 2 years can be very scary. But the only way that it continues to head in that direction is by being consistent. And then, shoot, you want to find yourself in these big boy recruiting battles, you go out there and you're able to keep winning some occasionally. You don't have to win every single one. I mean, let's just be realistic here. But if you're able to do that, then we're talking about Clemson, Alabama, Ohio State. Then you're able to do those things when it comes to being able to recruit on a national scale. USC's heading in that direction. They're doing a great job here, making sure if there's talented players in state, making sure they don't leave. Okay, we've seen that, especially with the class of 2024 intern, Joe. They're doing a good job. Control what you can right now. And if you're able to continue to show that consistency, like I said, on the field, then you will continue to find yourselves in situations like this with a Jordan Thomas, and you're able to go out there, and now you're competing recruiting-wise on a national scale.
Yeah, absolutely. No, and I think you summed it up pretty well there. You got to keep winning. Obviously, that's number one. Got to keep winning for you to be even in contention for some of these guys. But keep the momentum rolling is one. And then two, you kind of just, you have to stay in the mix for some of these bigger recruits. And recruiting in state is number one. I think that's huge. But two, like these guys talk to each other. They go to the camps like Dante did, and they're like, oh, you visited South Carolina. I loved it, blah, blah, blah. And these guys are actively recruiting each other. I think it's huge. And so Jordan Thomas is a big one. Peyton Lewis, another big one.
Yep.
A lot of different guys that, are visiting. And it's going to be a big summer for South Carolina. And again, we talk about the Robertson ad and what that's going to do. And I know these two guys that we've just talked about aren't defensive linemen, but when you have the whole staff on the same page, I think it's a very, very, very. I apologize. My grandmother was calling now.
Well, maybe she's interested in Peyton.
Yeah.
Maybe she's excited. I mean, it's the number one recruit in the state of Virginia.
We're going to land Dylan Stewart or not, clearly. But yeah, no. So I think it was big. But yeah, June 23rd. It'll be really, really fun to watch.
We're gonna hit a quick break here to get to some ads, and we're gonna begin with our good friend over at the Mortgage Network, Clint Hammond. Buying a home right now, well, it can be crazy, and Clint can help you out, and he can do what he did for former Gamecock captain and quarterback Perry Orth, as well as our very own at Gamecock Central, Wes Mitchell, helping them buy a home and making it a much easier process. Give him a call over at the Mortgage Network at 803-576-4450, and Clint Hammond will be able to help you out. And today's show is also brought to you by our good friends over at Liberty Tax, Intern Joe. Intern Joe loves Liberty Tax so much it just leaves him speechless because he forgets to have
absolutely.
The mic on.
I apologize, my mic was not on. Yeah, tax ID from our good friends over at Liberty Tax. As I pull this ad read up, I'm slacking a little bit, transitioning over from the two shows. But yeah, Mike, Liberty Tax, our good friends over there. Tax ID is that uncertain feeling you get right before doing your taxes, but you don't have to go through it alone. The tax team at Liberty Tax in Irmo, Lexington, and Columbia will walk you through the process, clear up any confusion, and guarantee you'll get the biggest possible refund or your money back. It's tax time, Mike. If you're in a hurry for your refund, call the tax team at Liberty Tax. Fast, accurate, and guaranteed. On the other hand, if you think you might be owing Sam, talk to the Liberty Tax team to make sure you're not paying more than you should owe. They'll find every possible deduction for you. Locally owned and operated, staffed by tax professionals from your neighborhood, open 9 to 9 on weekdays, 9 to 5 on Saturdays, multiple service options. Start through the Liberty Tax mobile app or through the desktop portal, make an appointment, or just walk in and give a call to upload your tax documents. And when you come in, your return will be ready to review and sign. Once again, their number is 803-462-5576. Give them a call for all of your tax needs. If you might be owing Uncle Sam or just need to do some tuning up from this tax season.
Tax season. And I know some people out there have the extension. So if you have the extension and you're in a pickle right now, reach out to Liberty Tax. All right, Intern Joe, we hit on the Robertson hire. Yep. We hit on what will be a very busy month of June coming up. And we shed some light on some of those players who you could expect to see. I mean, the players that we didn't mention who are going to be there on June 23rd, Mazio Bennett, Blake Franks, Wendell Gregory, Calvin Hunter, Cam Pringle, Dante Areno, Josiah Thompson, and Mike Williams. I mean, they're all due for visits, okay? And it's not that they're not important, because they are. Because, look, bottom line is this. They haven't signed anything. They can't sign anything until December when we get to that first national recruiting day, signing day. So I bring that up because, I think back to last year with South Carolina losing a linebacker, 4-star linebacker. Things happen. I'm not saying that will be the case with the USC, but you want to continue to stay on these guys. You want to continue to stay on them. We mentioned Reno with the MVP at the recent camp. Teams are reaching out to him. Satterfield of Nebraska. I mean, they're reaching out to these guys here. So you got to continue to make sure you're taking care of those players, but obviously you don't want to lose sight on what could also be some key additions if you're able to pick up, whether it be a guy like Peyton Lewis or Jordan Thomas or Jonathan Paylor. Of course, we mentioned Dylan Stewart as well in there. So that is kind of what is on the horizon for South Carolina as they get ready for what will be a busy June. And that, if you remember last year, that's when things really started to pick up. Really started to pick up for them from a recruiting standpoint, and it was phenomenal. It was phenomenal. So we'll have to wait and see on that. Draft. Want to talk about the draft real quick, and then we'll kind of come back around and talk a little bit more about Robertson. But you have Cam. You have Cam Smith be the first Gamecock drafted. Second round, 51st overall pick by the Dolphins. Zach Pickens, your boy, because I know you're excited about that. He's a Chicago Bear.
I'm so excited about Zach Pickens. I'll get into that after you're done.
Third round pick. You had Darius Rush. He's going to the Indianapolis Colts.
Yep.
Then you also had Jalen Brooks that was drafted in there by the Cowboys. And then you also had Gwen going to the Tampa. Oh my goodness. Sorry about that.
Tampa Bay. Yep.
Tampa Bay. So you have two Gamecocks going to Tampa with Eric Douglas going on there. He signed as an undrafted free agent. Josh Vann, undrafted free agent with the Carolina Panthers. Nate Atkins, undrafted free agent with the Denver Broncos. All undrafted. So all in all, you have 9 players. And we also have Sherrod Green, who signed with the Jets as an undrafted free agent. So I bring those up because when you hear that list, 5 players drafted, I believe, Intern Joe, Gamecocks drafted. That is the most they've had, I want to say, since 2013. I'll take just want to make sure I remember that correctly. It is, yes, it's the most players that the Gamecocks have had drafted in one NFL draft since 2013. And that was a pretty dang good class. DJ Swearinger, Ace Sanders, Marcus Lattimore, Devin Taylor, Devontae Holloman, TJ Johnson, and Justice Cunningham. And that, of course, was one of the most talented group of guys to have played at South Carolina when you talk about just a collective whole. So, of this group, I know you're excited about Pickens, though.
I'm very excited about Pickens.
What was just your initial takeaways on the 5 guys that got drafted? Did you expect all 5 to get drafted? Did you expect maybe another guy to get in there, or what was your overall thoughts?
I thought all 5 were going to get drafted. Jalen Brooks sneaking in there was a surprise to me. I figured he'd be an undrafted free agent, but sneaking in there in the second round or the 7th round, was good. The best fit. I'm a little biased with the Zach Pickens thing, but I think he'll be a really good Bear. I also think Cam Smith will make an immediate impact in Miami. I think he's going to be really, really, really special there. I think he'll fit into the system right away. I think, Cam on South Beach is it's a fun thought. But yeah, I'm really excited for Cam. Again, going to Miami, they're a winning team. Need a couple more pieces. Gets to get mentored by the great Xavier Howard, and so I think it's a big one. That's at least my best fit. My take on Pickens. I think Zach Pickens will fit great in Matt Eberflus defense. It's something that a lot of people expected the Bears to take Jalen Carter. They didn't. They went and took the offensive lineman from Tennessee, which was huge. And then you go take a guy like Zach Pickens. Unfortunately for Zach, it gets cold in Chicago. But I think Zach can adjust. And it's funny, too. It's crazy how the world works because I bumped into Zach I was flying home right around time of the draft combine for spring break and whatnot. And sure enough, Zach Pickens coming home from the combine. So it's funny that it worked out and he was a Bear. But I think he'll do big things in Chicago. I'm really excited. I think he's a really good scheme fit, works his butt off. I also like the 2 offensive linemen going to Tampa, E-Dug and Jovan Gwynn. I think both of those guys have a shot to make the roster. And both of those guys are really, 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 really talented as well, and will do well for the Bucks. And then the one, I guess, other surprise is Darius Rush falling so far. I thought he would be a 3rd round pick. Going the 5th round of the Colts. My little brother's a Colts fan. He's juiced. I mean, he's so pumped about it. Because I remember talking to him about playing basketball with Darius Rush, how athletic, but him sliding in the 5th round surprised me a little bit. But other than that, that's pretty much all I got from the draft.
So a couple things there that you mentioned that I want to get into. So during the draft with Darius Rush, talking to people that were close to the situation as he continued to drop. One of the concerns was his health. I mean, we know that going back to his days at South Carolina, he had a red shirt a year, for crying out loud, because of an injury. So I think that was in 2018. So I bring that up because, and he had, hamstring issues that he had to deal with as well. So I bring that up because I hated it for him, seeing him drop, because, I mean, you're looking at a lot of money. Every time you dropping down, you keep going more and more. So that's number one. But I think he goes to a team right now that needs a defensive back. Right? I mean,
With a defensive back.
You go over there, you have an opportunity to learn. But I think the thing with Darius is wherever he was going to be someone that had to make an impact on special teams. He'll make an impact with the Colts. If he can stay healthy, the sky's the limit. And I think more than anything, and I said this going into the second day of the draft, that regardless if Darius were to be drafted in the first, that would be the second and third round, regardless if he was going to be drafted in the first 2 days, it's not going to change what he's going to have to do to make a team. He's going to have to play special teams. Whether he was drafted in the third round, the fourth round, fifth round, sixth round, whatever the case may have been, he was going to have to play on special teams anyway. So that's the reason why he kept falling. With Cam Smith, what's going to help out Cam, we mentioned this before leading up to the draft, Cam has the experience of playing nickel. And because he can play nickel, that's going to help him see the field so much quicker compared to a lot of other corners who will either A, have never played nickel before, and they're on depth charts where they're competing to see some playing time, but because they don't have that nickel experience, it won't help them right away. Some guys are going to have to get taught that position. There's some guys that can pick it up. We've mentioned Carlins Patel when he came to South Carolina, which played a big role as to why the Steelers picked him up as a free agent last year, but he had never played nickel before in his life. So it's not just about learning the position. It's about also being able to do it because it's a totally different position, right? That's why I'm talking about cornerbacks. You can't just classify every cornerback as the same. When you play in that slot and you're playing that nickel position, it is a totally different game. The ball comes out differently. I mean, shoot, never mind the ball coming out quickly on the boundary side, but to be in that slot comes out totally different. And then you're on the other side, field side, and I mean the angles and tackling. I mean, it's a totally different ball game. Yeah. So, Cam has that experience that should help him. Jalen Brooks. I was surprised that Brooks got drafted, but I'm glad he did. And the reason why is, and I said this in our breakdown video that we posted for all these guys, whether they got drafted or they signed as undrafted free agents. Brooks' statistics in college, it doesn't paint the full picture as to what his value was when he was on the field. And the crazy thing about it is he played in 24 games at South Carolina. He missed 12. Some of that had to do with the NCAA not granting him immediate eligibility when he transferred in to South Carolina. He had to miss. It wasn't until week five when he first came on over here. And then he had the personal matter that he was dealing with, which had to miss the majority of that 2021 season after the first couple weeks, which I thought he did some good things early on. He made a phenomenal catch against Georgia. I mean, he showed that he had what it took to be special at USC, but I just felt like we weren't able to see it enough. But again, I think everything played out the way that it needed to with him because that all happens. He comes back and now he's realizing, shoot, I need to find a way to not just impress scouts as a receiver, but I got to play some special teams here too. And having seen already for 1 year the impact that Pete Lembo had on this program, seeing how it helped a guy like Nick Muse in the draft a year ago, because Muse was like, shoot, I want to come back. I want to play special teams because I really didn't get to do that when Muschamp was here. I know that will help my draft stock. And what happened with Nick Muse? Well, he was drafted late by the Vikings. He got called up for multiple games. I think it was 10 this past year. And he played in 10 games all on special teams. So I bring those things up, Intern Joe, because I think with Brooks, the fact, and he mentioned it numerous times, he was no dummy. He was, I thought the way Brooks sold himself to the media during the draft process was exactly the way he should have, which is continuing to remind people, and I'm sure he did this with scouts too when he met with teams, 4-unit special teams player. 4-unit special teams player. He can do things for you that help from a numbers standpoint. Because in the NFL, it's all about versatility. It's all about versatility. Yeah, of course, if you're a quarterback or what, I get that. But if you're a guy towards the bottom of the depth chart, receiver, defensive back, running back, whatever the case may be, linebacker, those guys have to find ways to make an impact on special teams. They have to. That's going to be something as I look at the depth chart here with Josh Vann, which essentially this roster, I mean, I feel like I'm looking at South Carolina for crying out loud, because you got Damiere Byrd on the team. I'm just going down the roster right here. You got Damiere Byrd at wide receiver. Of course, J.C. Horn's on defense at corner. Keep going down the list. You got Shi Smith there at wide receiver, who's done a tremendous job of bouncing back and making the most out of his opportunity, and he'll have a bigger opportunity this year to be able to see more playing time. Then you got Josh Vann as well. So I bring all that up because there's going to be comfortability for Vann because there's going to be so many former Gamecocks around him. He's going to have to find a way to make an impact on special teams as well.
Yeah, Mike, and you look, I mean, I think it helps. And I think that's why a lot of these guys were drafted, because of South Carolina's ability to execute on special teams, especially later on in the year. I think the Lembo ball and the Beamer balls certainly helped some of these guys find rosters, because these teams, these NFL teams, know that they can play special teams. If they played special teams in South Carolina, they know that they were taught right. So I think that's big, especially at first too. And I liked your point about Rush. Rush can definitely play special teams. That's how he's going to see the field in Indianapolis. And I think Rush can certainly find his way onto the field quickly if he does well on special teams and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. You know, checks all the boxes, because I don't think Indy is very deep. And he also joins, South Carolina grad and legendary cornerback, Stephon Gilmore. So in Indy. So I think that's huge, and it's going to be a big, who doesn't want to be mentored by Stephon Gilmore? I think that's huge, and good for Rush for being able to go into that situation. And I think, again, I said it. I think he'll be able to make an impact. He's one of those guys I'm looking at that you might, see on the field this year, if not this year, next year, and the future. I think he's got a bright future in the NFL.
No, I'm excited for him. And another guy too, and I know we talked about him, and you have Sherrod Green going up to New York. Shaq Wilson's up there. Had a chance to talk with Shaq. Shaq's very excited to be able to reunite with another Gamecock. So that's something to keep an eye on. And he said that they're excited as a organization to bring Sherrod in, because the thing that is just frustrating, and there's so much love. If you head on over to the Gamecock Central Instagram page, we posted 9 videos, 5 of the draftees and 4 that were undrafted free agents. The amount of love, and that's not to say that people don't love the other players if they didn't have as many interactions or anything like that, but the amount of love that Sherrod Green got just speaks volumes about how many people appreciate him, especially his teammates. Sherrod would have been a guy that easily would have been drafted in the top 5 if it hadn't been for back-to-back seasons of injuries. He was a guy that came here, which it seems like it was forever ago. I think it was 2017, his freshman season, which is crazy because that was my second year in Columbia. the year before Perry Worth was still there. So he's been here for a while, point being. And Sherrod was doing incredible things. I mean, the amount of games that he had started in his sophomore season and junior year, he was destined, like I said, he was destined to be drafted early if those injuries didn't hit. And unfortunately, the injury bug did get him. What I liked about Sherrod, though, is he went through 2 injuries. 2. Could have been real easy for him to say, you know what, screw it, I'm done with this. But instead, he came back. And not only did he come back, but he posted over 70 tackles, a career high for him. I think he had 3.5 tackles for a loss, 2.5 sacks, something like that. I bring those things up because when he's healthy, that's a steal for the Jets. That is a steal for the Jets. I hope he gets his opportunities. I hope he can make the most. Another player that will need to make an impact on special teams. I hope he can make an impact on special teams because he's so damn talented when he's healthy. And then the other one too, Nate Atkins, and I said this in the video, I would argue that he was one of the most valuable players that South Carolina had last year, just when you look at the amount of things that he did. And I'm not even talking about necessarily the one-handed catch against Clemson or forcing a fumble. Those are small snippets of the big picture of what he did on 2 different units there. So, again, you have a guy like Atkins who can make an impact on special teams. Offensively, he's listed as a fullback by NFL.com. He'll play that hybrid position, kind of like Pat DeMarco did. He'll probably be mainly a special teams guy to start, and then he'll start to carve out a role on offense. And that's what DeMarco was telling me last week as well, that he thinks that will be his path that he'll most likely have to go to. He doesn't have to be the guy that has 30-plus receptions. He doesn't have to be. But he's the guy that's going to do the dirty work. The jobs that people don't want to do, Atkins will say, give me that. I'll take it. Whatever you need me to do. And that's what's going to help him out a lot.
Yeah. Gritty player. So good for Nate. I'm glad he got his opportunity. Figured it would be as an undrafted free agent, but the NFL needs fullbacks, man. I went to high school with one who got drafted by the Chargers a couple years back. And so I see him finding a role for sure. Hopefully make the team and whatnot. But I mean, knowing Nate's work ethic, he's going to find a way. If there's a will, there's a way for Nate. So I'm super excited for him and for E-Dog and all the guys who signed undrafted free agent contracts. Go make the team. Go shock the world, because there are a lot of good players in the NFL right now that are on rosters that are playing good minutes and stuff like that, that were undrafted free agents. So best of luck to those guys.
And as we wrap things up here, Intern Joe, I know there's a couple questions in there, and we'll kind of circle back to Robertson as well. But a couple housekeeping notes to make. Jalen Nichols, offensive lineman who went down during the spring game. Shane Beamer didn't say the specifics, but he did mention that, quote, pretty significant injury, in that he doesn't expect him to be ready for the start of the season. I'll give you the exact quote. He said, quote, Jalen, as you guys saw in the spring game, he suffered a pretty significant injury. He won't be ready for the beginning of the season. I'll say that. Optimistic that the recovery process will go well, and we'll get him back hopefully before the season is over, but he won't be ready to start the season. So you hear that, you start to do some math in your head. Okay, what could that injury be? And I think a lot of us just assumed, again, lower body injury, that's what they're calling it. A lot of us would assume that it's an ACL injury, potentially an MCL. So I don't want to play doctor and say, okay, this is exactly what it is. But you start to, put some things together here. It's like, okay, this happened at the end of April. Beamer's saying he's optimistic that he'll be able to recover before the season's over. I mean, shoot, if you just put 6 months from where we are right now, 6 months, that brings us to the beginning of November. That's 6 months. And again, I'm not going to play doctor and say, well, you have this injury. This is how many months you're typically out there for. I'll let you guys do that. But that's the update with with Nichols.
Mm-hmm.
And also something we wanted to hit on with Tonka. He told Gamecock Central that his rehabbing is going well and he's hoping to be back soon by the summer. So just the injury housekeeping notes to share.
Yep, absolutely. Yeah, prayers up for Jalen Nichols. Hope he's speedy recovery for him. But ready for some questions, Mike?
Yeah, let's hit a couple questions here and then we'll wrap things up.
Greg asked, when he's swinging by the island, let me buy you a drink.
Greg, you've already asked me this. When you say the island, where are we talking about here? I mean, do you have an idea? No, it can't be. It has to be down here.
I would think
it has
so.
to be in South Carolina.
I would think it's Strong Island, but
Strong Island. I thought you said Long. I thought you said Long Island.
No, that's Strong Island, Long Island. Same thing.
Up in New York?
Yeah, I mean, that's the only place I've ever heard it referred to as like the island, and people from Long Island it's like, when are you coming to the island? I don't know. That's just me. So as we wait for Greg to get back, here's another one of his points. This is where I started. He will bring a lot from schools via Sean Elliott and the D-line coach in Spurrier. I'm trying to remember his name though.
Oh, I see it. Yeah. And Greg, and get back to Greg. There's only one island, Greg. Absolutely. Nantucket. We're not talking about being on the island of Long Island here. No. Greg, I'll tell you what, I've never been to Nantucket. I know the Beamers went out there last year because I remember Emily Beamer telling us how excited they were all excited about going out there. And we had to gather a list for them because I've never been to Nantucket. We'd love to get out there, though.
I've never been north of DC on the East Coast.
You have a whole other world to see, my man.
I know. I haven't been to New York. I haven't been to Boston. I need to get there.
But to go back to Greg's point, though, and I didn't mention this earlier. Yes, Sean Elliott, of course, Georgia State, that connection. Travian Robertson mentioned it multiple times how appreciative he is of Sean Elliott. And, I mean, he was the coach that gave him an opportunity, that believed in him, gave him his first coaching gig. So that was someone that Robertson brought up today, that he reached out to him. I don't know if it was last night, he said, or if it was when he accepted the position, but he had, he spoke with him recently. And Elliott, of course, Camden guy, coached over here at South Carolina, even though he's got so much respect for what is going on right now with the program, and he could not be happier for Robertson. Let's just put it that way. Yeah. Matt Gadino podcast. Appreciate you guys. We kind of had fun with this. I think it was last week, Intern Joe, just a little bit.
Yeah.
But I don't know if you thought about it a little bit more.
Yeah. Oh yeah, absolutely. I obviously I can see Spencer and Juice going high. But I like Magandino's take about Tonka. I think Tonka is going to be really good. I think Boogie Huntley might be a later round guy or an undrafted free agent. Birch, whatever. I'm not going to talk about Birch this week, I promise. But I like this take from Magandino about Tonka. I think Tonka's got it, and he's got all the goods. I think O'Donnell Fortune is another guy I'm looking at. If OD Fortune has a good year this year, I think he will go very high on draft boards. 2 to 3 players go in the first. It depends on the year Spencer and Juice have. If Spencer Rattler has an insane year and goes absolutely bonkers, yeah, he'll be a first round pick. But I don't see it. With all the tape, like Spencer would need to do something crazy to be a first round pick next year.
I think another player to pay attention to is Marcel Style.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
He's a guy that, he was targeted a lot last year, and there were things that he can certainly get better at. But when he was on, he was special. He was really special. Had 3 picks last year, 12 pass breakups. I don't know. I mean, I really think that OD is going to have a phenomenal season. I really do. And I'm high on both of these players. And it's not to say, okay, I think OD is going to go ahead of, but again, when you look at these guys, one thing that we keep mentioning with a lot of the players that just got drafted here is the impact they have on special teams. And both guys have had impacts on special teams. And they're going to have to continue to do that. And, as we've seen with Beamer, he's not afraid to put starters out there. No question about that. And then another thing, too, another player that I want to keep an eye on. I mean, look, the Trey Knox, there's players that I'm interested to see. Like a Trey Knox has an opportunity to return for another year after this season if he chooses to do so. Does he do that? I mean, we'll have to wait and see. So, there's some guys that I'm not going to mention like, okay, yeah, this is who I'm thinking. But Colin brought this player up last week or the other day. I don't remember when he did, kind of players looking ahead for 2024. Jordan Strawn to me is an interesting one. Because if Jordan can stay healthy, again, and I've said this before.
He's a beast, man.
I'm not holding my breath for Jordan Strawn to produce the way that I expected him to produce last year. He was on his way to leading the team in sacks.
Yep.
There's no question that would have happened. There's no question. No question that would have happened. I know he got hurt early in the season, but he had a sack in that game against Arkansas. Could have had another one too. I bring that up because if he can be healthy and he can have a strong bounce back season, it might not necessarily be a player that gets drafted. He might not get drafted, but he could definitely get brought into a team. I mean, not the exact same, but kind of like a Sherrod Green situation. It's just like, okay, if this guy can be healthy, we know what we're getting from him. But unfortunately for Sherrod, he only had 1 year left. Well, the good thing was he bounced back strong. Can Jordan Strawn do that this year? I think he can.
Yeah, good take. I like it. I'm here for it. Mac and Dina responded. The rep Tonka had on edge against ND. The Bull was the best pass rush I saw from us all season. Like that take. And Dial at times looked like our best cover corner. Yeah, absolutely. No, I completely agree. Good takes, good takes. Last one from Brian. We get a running back yet, Mike?
Nothing right now.
Nothing yet.
Nothing right now. But the interesting thing is this, okay? And this is new to everyone. I mean, shoot, Beamer even mentioned it today and how being out at the charity golf tournament. I don't want to actually say the name of it because I can't remember exactly what it's called. Get all these different ones. Here it is. The Southern Company Beach Bowl Challenge. That is the golf outing that all the coaches were in. And Shane Beamer was out there today before taking the old private jet back over for the press conference. Must be nice. Private jet life. But the portal, and he said he was talking with the other coaches about this, like Dan Mullen, and some of these coaches are obviously not coaching right now, like a Mullen or an Urban Meyer, but he talked with some of the other guys too, and this is all new to them, that you had these 2 weeks where the transfer portal window, a second transfer portal window was open, and that was from April 15th until the end of the month. So now, okay, windows close. This month of May, again, typically very slow. I don't think it's going to be super slow, Intern Joe. I really don't. Not for a lot of teams, or for some teams at least. I mean, look what's going on at Colorado right now.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know. I don't necessarily think it's going to be slow either. Yeah, I don't know.
Because South Carolina doesn't. They don't have a lot. I don't want to say, okay, this is how many scholarships they have left, because it's going to confuse people, because there's some things that they're moving around here.
Oh yeah.
They put it this way, they're limited right now with how many scholarships they have left. Okay. I'll just put it that way. They're limited right now with how many scholarships they have left. So if you're trying to acquire a running back or whatever the position may be, you're limited right now.
Yeah.
I don't know how. I think South Carolina is going to surprise some people if they don't add a running back through the portal. If they don't add a running back through the portal, I think they're going to surprise. They're going to surprise some people with how they do it running back. But again, and Intern Joe, we've mentioned this before. A lot of that, it doesn't have necessarily to do with Takarion Joyner or Juju McDowell or Mario Anderson or Braswell. Dontavius Braswell, who's going to be coming in here, or any running back that you want to throw in there. I know we got some walk-ons that are in the mix as well there. It has nothing to do with that. What it has to do with is how is that offensive line going to look? Because I don't care who you can put Marcus Lattimore back there. How's this offensive line going to look? That's the biggest question to me.
Yeah.
And I would have said this even before Nichols went down.
Yeah, I think it starts with the O-line. I think if you're in a good spot with the offensive line, I don't think you really need to go get a running back. If this coaching staff is confident with where their O-line's at, I don't foresee them going get a running back. It kind of just depends, really. And I mean, we talked about Colorado last week, so I'm not going to get into them too much. But like, I just don't. I think a lot of the transfers that you would see, like guys like going to your school, happen in the fall. I feel like a lot of not a whole lot of like headlining. Oh my gosh, transfers.
What did we say last week, Intern Joe? Though, what did we say? We said pay attention to this because I know there were some Gamecock fans saying, "Why are we talking about Colorado?"
Yeah.
It was going to impact you in some shape, way, or form.
Yeah.
And it might not impact you directly. It might not impact you directly from a head-to-head recruiting standpoint, but it impacts you in this regard, okay? If a team like Georgia, a team like Clemson, a team like Michigan, whatever the case may be, they're going after guys in the portal. I'm just making this up. They go after a guy or two in the portal, okay? Well, Colorado, they have to fill up about friggin' 50-something scholarships. So what do? Well, they're using it all on the portal. And now, kind of like supply and demand, bring you back to your old economic class days. I don't know if you took them in high school or college. But because of that, there's a shortage on maybe a running back, a receiver, a linebacker, because some of these players are going to Colorado. And now you have more schools going after another running back. There might be fewer running backs. So the point being is it might not impact South Carolina directly, but it has an impact. It has an impact in some shape, way, or form. And I'm not going to be surprised. I'm not going to be surprised when we're sitting here next year, and it's not just Colorado, and the portal really becomes a crazy thing. If Colorado has success this season, and again, this is the reason I'm telling you to pay attention to this. This is the reason why. It has nothing. People get so caught up on, oh, it's not SEC football. Okay, it's fine. Bless you, Intern Joe.
Thank you.
And no one's saying that. But what I am saying is, if Colorado's able to have success this year, if they're able to have success, and what does success necessarily mean? Well, they were a team that only had one win last year. So to me, they were a team that gets up to 7+ wins. If they get to 7+ wins, that's success. That's success.
Yeah.
And if they could do that, Intern Joe, other people are paying attention. I can tell you there's people at South Carolina paying attention to what's going on in Colorado, inside that building at USC. And the reason I say that and what I mean by that is if Colorado is able to have that success this year, I'm not saying USC is going to blow up everything they've been doing and the way they've been doing things, but they're paying attention to how things are being done over there. What we saw from Deion cutting guys, that's not new. The reason why it became such a big story is because it was on a much larger scale. You were cutting more guys than we had ever seen at once. Telling guys, hey, you can stick around, but maybe, you're not going to play here. Basically trying to force guys out. It happens everywhere. Okay?
Yep.
Throughout college football. I'm interested to see how it plays out because, again, might not have a direct impact on South Carolina, but it will surely have an indirect impact over time.
Mm-hmm. Definitely.
All right, Intern Joe. I think we're going to wrap it up here. But again, big story today out of South Carolina. Travian Robertson, former Gamecock captain. He's coming on home, officially being introduced today as South Carolina's newest defensive line coach after Jimmy Lindsay was hired over at LSU, is getting paid $475,000 this upcoming season from USC, Goes over to LSU, though, according to The Athletic, getting paid $750,000, and the Tigers will also be paying for his buyout at South Carolina, $300,000. Appreciate everyone tuning in tonight. We'll do it again next week. We'll pay attention to the recruiting trails. We'll pay attention to the portal. Intern Joe, I'm going to go out on a limb here. Hit me. I am going to say that there will be a player that South Carolina picks up in the portal the next time we do a show. Next Tuesday.
Yeah, wouldn't shock me. If we see some suits on your Twitter, we know something's up. You got the goods. You're leading us on here, Mike.
Well, everyone have yourself a good week. Enjoy your Cinco de Mayo on Friday if you celebrate that. And have yourself a great weekend as well.